Poshoglian. I'm the author of Frankie Fox Girl Spy, and guess what? This is where I write. I get to write in a museum. Come in and join me. As I lead you literally up the garden path, you're going to see an absolutely beautiful little timber cottage which is buried right in the heart of North Sydney, which is a tiny, well, it's actually a big council area just north of the Harbour Bridge. If you just throw a stone that way, you'll hit the Harbour Bridge itself. So it's a really beautiful historic area to be working in. What's more, as a writer, I'm absolutely spoiled in having this little spot here all to myself. I do share it with the occasional museum guest because it is actually a working museum as well. That's okay. So this is Don Bank Cottage in North Sydney. It's the last remaining timber slab cottage of its kind, and over there is my residence. So you can see it's not a bad little place to write, and I'm going to show you inside so that you can actually see where I write and where I'm lucky enough to write this year. In 2015 I happen to be the writer in residence here, so come and join me. So you can see Don Bank is a beautiful old cottage, beautiful old verandas. It does, I think, creak a lot, so it's quite an atmospheric place to work in. When it's not a writing residence, it's obviously a museum for the locals. Lots of people come and check it out. It has a lot of beautiful history to it, and it had some original occupants who've and it's currently being restored by the council in the most beautiful way, so come in and have a look at it. You can see, if you want to come and visit, it costs $2 to come in and visit, and I'm going to take you through the entrance to the museum, and that's where it leads into my residence. So it's quite a quirky place to write, but if you love history like I do, and particularly Sydney's colonial history, it's an amazingly atmospheric and motivating place to write. There's certainly a lot to be said for writing in an older residence. So come through. You can see that they've recently restored this area with artefacts that they've dug up from around the place, and they're sort of building a story of this particular residence. Don Bank wasn't actually a man who lived here. Nobody really knows why it's called Don Bank, but it did belong to a family that was well established actually this local area of North Sydney, which is a beautiful part of Sydney. So I'm quite lucky. I grew up in this area, so to actually have my own residence here is, yeah, it's really wonderful. Come through and have a look at my residence. Okay, so this is where I actually write at the moment. I do have my own home, and I don't want to show you what that looks like because my spare writing room has turned into an ironing room. So guys, this is what you get if you get a writing residence. You get a beautiful little setup. I've got a gorgeous little place to have friends over. I run a writing group here, and I've done lots of events with the local community this year, lots of writing projects to come with the students in this area. In my day job, I'm a high school teacher, so it's actually really important to be able to have this space to come here and know that I can escape the world at large. And as Don Bank is a museum, usually I'm here during odd hours, so it's a quiet, contemplative place to be. And if you're a writer, you really need that. If you're a teacher, you really need that, because you need that break from the kids. Look, I'm a materialist at heart. I absolutely love objects. I need stuff around me. And so I've brought just a few things this year to have with me. These are gifts that have been given to me by friends, things I've collected along the way, and actually a lot of them are writing motivation for me. I'm a big fan of writing motivation. I'm a big fan of social media. Sometimes it's to the detriment of writing because it can be a distraction, but it's really important to have beautiful things for me around me anyway. Another really important place I want to show you is the kitchen. So come through and have a look. Okay, so this is where I make a million cups of tea. So I'm very lucky this year to have this title and this position of writer in residence. And actually I could live here if or spend longer periods of time if I really wanted to, but at the moment I use it to make lots of cups of tea, have some downtime, and get over to my writing desk and actually spend time at the desk without worrying about stuff like putting on a load of washing or noticing how dirty something suddenly is. That can be the greatest distraction for a writer. You'll have a great clean house, believe me, but you won't have a book written. So come and see where I actually do write. So look, this is a really big luxury for a writer. You can actually see here, this is not normal. I actually am an extremely messy person when I write, so having this actual extra space for me is really great. And I've tried to keep to a more minimalist sort of scheme this year, which has been probably better for me given that my mental health is not great a lot of the time because I've got so many things on. So I'm going to show you a few things that are really important to me. I do write children's books, and for me it's a flight of fantasy. Just like any novelist or any writer of fiction, I absolutely need the time to just imagine the creative worlds that I'm working in. And actually the setting for my book, Frankie Fox, is set in a city called Harbour City, which Sydney is affectionately known as. And Sydney and its harbour have played a really important part in a lot of my books, but it's really, really important to Frankie and her character. And I often think that Frankie is living somewhere near here on the water in her boathouse. So she's really not very far from me every time I sit down here to write. So, tools of the trade. Some flowers from the garden, that's really important. It's nice to have nice things around you. A cup of tea, always really important to have a cup of tea. I'd go through the stuff like nothing else. A biscuit. Snacking is not a writer's friend, it's not good for your body, but you need it. It's sustenance, it's really important. My computer, my beloved computer, and you'll see that I write on a laptop. I'm not completely wed to working in one place. I can write in the lounge, I can write at home, I can write in libraries. Part of my work here in North Sydney, I spend time writing at the Stanton Library as well. But look, I've got this beautiful space. I've got my computer. I've got some things that mean a lot to me. This is my notebook that I'm currently using this year. It was given to me by someone very special who understands what I'm doing, and I always use one notebook at a time while I'm writing. It's my little Bible that I jot down all my ideas in. And although I don't write down longhand, I journal and write down my ideas in long form. Here's my other big baby, my diary. It's really important for me to be organised. Even though most people would say I'm a chaos merchant, I'm actually quite organised, and I do follow a bit of a diary and a schedule because I'm juggling lots of commitments. And I have to make sure that I schedule time for my writing, otherwise it simply doesn't get done. So if you're looking to write, make sure you book that time away for yourself to say, this is my writing time. I've gotten better at doing that over the years, by the way. Some other things that really have meant a lot to me over the years, I've got a lot of writing guides that I use, and sometimes when I'm really stuck on plot, I refer to them. It can be a distraction, but it can also help me through a plot point. And one of the books that I really loved when I wrote my first novel, it was called This Year You Write Your Novel by Walter Mosley, and it's such a scary title that it really propelled me into action, and I really had to call myself on whether I was a writer or not. So I've always got a few writing guides around me to keep the motivation going. Got my trusty computer. I always have a historical book of Sydney's on the go. This is another book that really means a lot to me. It's by Ruth Park. It's called The Sydney We Love. As you can tell, I'm obsessed with Sydney's history, particularly its colonial history, and even the history forms a lot of what I do when I'm writing the Frankie Fox stories. So Frankie actually is a hero in the making for those of you that don't know her. She's an 11-year-old that goes to Chelmsford School for Girls, ladies' school, and she thinks she could be a spy in training. She's actually a super brilliant student, and she just needs to be picked up by the right people and trained. But it turns out she actually has a very interesting past. So I might just read you the opening page of Frankie because I don't want to give too much away, and plus there's a lot of mystery involved in this book, and there's a lot of clues and things for you to solve. So here we go, chapter 1. The beginner spy is always on the lookout for changes in routine. A good spy picks up on small details such as new people, new objects out of place, and unusual behaviour. Most importantly, a good spy never gets caught. They keep their notes in code, and they always watch their back. So in this particular story, Frankie is guided by a spy's handbook that she finds. And if you love clues, whether you're an adult or a younger person, this is a great story that involves lots of clues and code cracking, because Frankie has to end up saving the day, and actually somebody who's quite close to her too. So I'm going to whet your appetite with just that little bit of Frankie. The second story is also out now, Operation Boy Band, and I'm working on the next Frankie Fox stories and a few other top secret projects that you're not allowed to tell anyone about. But suffice to say, working in such a beautiful historic area, my imagination is always in overdrive, and that's actually a problem for me. A lot of people always talk about writer's block. Writer's block is really not something that I suffer from. What I actually suffer from is just too many ideas. I actually have to often bring myself back to finding the right idea for me and a story that's going to work, because everything for me just tips off my writing mind. But when it all gets too much over there and I've spent enough time at the computer, it's really nice to have walks. And I think as a writer, whenever you talk to writers, they're often great at taking walks. Walking is really important. Having fresh air is really important too. This is what I do. I come up and I go to these windows. It is a very windy day in Sydney today, but as you can see, it's not a bad little vista to look out through and sort of catch your breath and think, what would Frankie do next? What's her next step? How is she going to avoid the alliance this time and thwart the enemy? For me, I very much live in my head and in my characters, so actually stepping it out the side here is really great, because it keeps me grounded and it makes me also remember that there is a world out there. And North Sydney is just a beautiful place to be in, and I am spoilt this year by having this residence. But I really would sort of say that in my writing career so far, I've been able to write anywhere. School desks, libraries, my lounge, my bed, my spare room, which is currently full of clothes to be ironed. But this residence has been a wonderful addition to my life this year, and I've only got 6 months left on it, so I've got some serious deadlines to get on with. I hope you've really enjoyed learning about where I write and seeing where I write, and I'd love for you to drop me a line if you're interested in knowing a bit more about this amazing house that I'm in. And I'd love to thank North Sydney Council for giving me this opportunity, and being involved with Hachette Australia, who are publishing Frankie Fox and have been an incredibly huge source of support, and also to my readers. So I really hope that you're inspired to write, you know a little bit more about the writing life from my perspective. You've bared with my terrible voice today, I've got the croaks, but thank you very much for joining me on Where I Write, and I look forward to staying in touch with you and keeping you informed. All the best.